back to theatre to everyone. I hope you enjoyed the keynotes this morning. For our next session, let's get into an interesting fireside chat to deep dive into what are some of the biggest challenges for organizations in the past couple of years and what skills and capabilities do HR leaders need to build if they are to deliver against these rapidly changing business expectations and dynamisms. Before I invite the two guests for this session, let me remind you again to keep sharing your learnings and reflections from this session on LinkedIn using the hashtag TechHRSG. This might make you win Marshall headphone speakers. So, what better than that? Keep sharing and keep winning. And now, let me invite Shaswat Kumar, Vice President, Advisory and Cloud Solutions, Alight Solutions. Shaswat has close to 2 decades of experience. He has been an advisor to various Fortune 500 corporations on their HR services, delivery transformation, shared services, offshoring, and change management initiatives. Joining Shaswat, we have Suyen Wong, founder and CEO, Bronze Phoenix. Suyen helps audiences around the world navigate the intersection of technology, strategy, and leadership. She has been recognized for thought leadership on strategy, organizational development, and the future of work. She currently serves on the board of several public, private, and non-profit organizations. So, welcome, Shaswat and Suyen. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm so glad to have you all with us. Let's just jump straight into this discussion around how HR is really transforming and evolving. So, Shaswat, really looking forward to getting your insights on this here because you've obviously been working in the space for a long time. So, big picture, right? What are the biggest challenges that you've seen organizations tackling in the past couple of years? Could you share your perspectives on that?
Suen, thanks, and hi everyone. Suen, and we have been seeing the whole pressure on HR for some time around businesses being changed, going through the change and so on. But I will say the biggest one over last, say, 3-4 years has been the whole. I will not only say the buzzword, but the reality of transformation hitting businesses. So any business you go to and talk to, they will have multiple transformation, business transformation, digital transformation projects happening today. And then it's a combination. It's happening because of innovation in marketplace. It's happening because of delayering of organization, automation, and so on. At times, many transformations are happening because consumer expectations or employee expectations have changed. But fundamentally, all these transformations are coming to a business leader. And as a business leader, when they start looking at it and seeing what's holding them back, really the distillation coming back is it's HR. Because whether it's a digital transformation or a business transformation, all of them boil down to org change, job change, a mindset change, behavior change. And then that's where it's interesting more than HR. I think business leaders are saying we need to rewire HR for future because that will really get us success with business. And that's the big shift happening. Talent agenda, employee agenda, all that was there. HR was getting central to business success. I think COVID has just accelerated it many more with a lot more, I will say, throttle. But that's the big change which has been happening for 3 to 5 years.
And you mentioned COVID. I mean, to me, when I work with different organizations and clients, these changes were already in place, but COVID has really accelerated the change, right? So organizations are going through these disruptions. Industries were shedding a whole bunch of jobs because of automation or robotics and artificial intelligence. So that was already happening in the last few years, but COVID, I think, has really, turbocharged this trend. So, you talked really about the implications on HR, which is that HR really needs to transform itself for the future. Yeah. So, what does this mean in terms of what HR needs to actually do as a function that's different than what HR traditionally has been focused on?
Yeah, so we do a fair bit of research in that space, but if you and I will not get into complex model. That's the bane of consultants. You have been consultant for years, and I've been consultant for so long. But to put it simply, HR needs to change both what they do and how they do.
Hmm.
Just a simple construct. As they think of what HR needs to be totally outside in. So, and it will be wrong to say that outside in is only a business focus outside in. It's a more holistic thing, whether it's employee or other stakeholders be outside in that thinking. That's one. The other thing is how of working in HR needs to be way more data driven.
Hmm.
And because that's where you get saved from making mistakes. Also, when you are data driven, there is greater chance for collaboration to happen between within HR itself, which is a challenge all the time.
Yeah.
In fact, in COVID times, HR has collaborated fairly well. So how do you make a habit of it? You need data to really sustain that collaboration and also collaborate and work better with the stakeholders. Again, you need data. So these are the two things to change. And to us, the aha moment, Suyen, on adaptability and adaptable HR, on really that became the theme of even this whole tech HR this time was the key differentiator was discipline around this.
Hmm.
So we realized the outlier organizations are the one who are using this data to understand what really needs to change in HR, sitting with business leaders, understanding how this change will look like, what is needed to be done, and then going back and implementing that in HR and literally running it like a monthly cycle. So
Hmm.
in today's day and age, people will say it's fashionable, so it's agile, but it's not agile. Good organizations have been doing it for very long period of time. So that's really the thing which pulls everything ahead. So when you start doing it, you get your outcomes right, you do so many other things right. And I will love to hear your perspective, because in your life as not only consultant in past but even now being an advisor to many leaders, you will be seeing some of that come alive, because it's a habit change in HR.
I completely agree. From a finance function perspective, we're used to basically seeing every month you get the monthly reports, right?
Yeah.
It's the rhythm. That's the rhythm that happens. And then you've got your quarterly board meetings, you look at your financials and so on. And I think I really resonate with what you're saying in terms of creating a similar analytic based reporting mechanism for the people function. And then
Yeah.
embedding that into operations. I mean, you do the same thing with manufacturing. You have a manufacturing plant. You look at this daily, right?
Yeah.
So the rhythm, I think, needs to really be much more just in time, as opposed to, well, once a year, let's look at our succession plans, and once a year, let's look at our attrition for the past year, compare that, or once a year, let's look at our engagement scores and see how we're doing. I think it's really moving to a much more rapid turnaround cycle, which again, it's not new for any of the other functions, right? So I really agree with the point.
In
Yeah,
fact, Suyan, to your point, I think it's also, I will not say it's necessarily new for all organizations in HR. There have
sure.
been great firms doing it in past.
Yep.
And what we call it, it's a lifestyle change of telling his stories on based on anecdotes to telling his stories based on data. So that's the lifestyle change needed in HR.
Yeah.
But you are right, all functions do that. Of even the most challenged functions like marketing and others do that. So it's high time that HR moves to this.
Yeah, and you're right. It's not a blanket statement that all
Yeah.
organizations don't do this. I would say that the best practice ones are definitely up on that curve.
Yeah.
But I would say, I mean, it's really hard to put percentages against this. But I would say more organizations do not have the same HR data cadence than actually do, right? So at this
Yeah.
point, it needs to sort of change the ratio a little bit more. Whereas all organizations have a financial reporting cadence. That's pretty much a given. I'm curious, as a follow on to that, are you able to share any examples of organizations that have successfully adapted and evolved their HR practices? I mean, you've worked with a lot of leading companies.
Yeah.
Any success stories you could share with us?
Okay, so I think, and then that's where, Suyan, I will go back to your earlier point, that most people in HR don't get it right, because I will say most people do not really connect to right outcomes and the right question. So let's, and I have talked in past about this example, and it's such a powerful example is there is so much of money thrown into leadership development.
Yeah.
And it's also one of the areas where you see least amount of satisfaction from business leaders, and there are enough studies and data around it. One of the reasons for that is people do not really measure the program for the right impact, because it's very logical if you think of critical roles being critical to business success. So critical roles are the role holders who deliver business strategy. In that case, a leadership program's first primary function is to de-risk the strategy itself, than to say that it's just a training program. The moment you put that lens, you will suddenly see collaboration between leadership group and exec comp go up. Traditionally, these guys do not collaborate very well. And then the matrix become very simple. You need to tie in the current critical role holders. You need to put a high performance impact to current critical role holders, because you cannot have wrong incumbents there, because you risk your strategy. You need to look at the pipeline to that. And there the pipeline measure is not really Suan measure of satisfaction with leadership program. The
Right.
measures has to be different. If
Yeah.
someone is getting into my leadership program, can I put that person for promotion faster? Because without the program, if someone was getting ready in 4 years time in that talent pipeline, can I reduce that 4 years to 3 years
Yeah.
and make the performance in future roles same or better? That's the ROI. So the moment you get the outcome and the questioning right, everything starts falling in place. Two challenges why it typically does not happen. One is HR has these natural silos within HR, which tend to kind of fragment things. And second is typically outside in outcome thinking was less to be found in HR. Having said that, great organizations do that. And I have seen organizations do this very well. And today, all systems and tools allow for it. You can literally track the current incumbent, their feeder roles, how long they have been in those feeder roles, and whether your program has accelerated that. So your question is super relevant, but I will want more examples to be out there, but we don't have too many examples. But there are some organizations who do it well. So I just took one
Yeah.
outcome and an example around that.
I think part of it's also when you think about a typical training evaluation process. It's the standard stuff, which you ask the person who was trained, whether it's leadership or otherwise, their satisfaction with the program. So they could be highly satisfied with the program. They could have enjoyed it a lot, but did it actually lead to improved outcomes for the individual and the organization? And that just takes like you said, asking the right questions, but also a longer time horizon. And I think a lot more embedded learning. But by embedded learning, it's we all know this, right? You go into a training program 1 day, 2 days, even 5 days, but your learning really happens over a course of weeks and months and years, right? So it's a much longer time horizon. It's almost like like when you're evaluating the efficacy of an education system, right? How strong your education system has to do not just with the students that you put in today, but how they come out of that system 10 or 12 years after the fact, right? So I think it does need a bit of a longer term perspective. When you think about the kind of skills and capabilities that HR leaders need to build, because obviously business expectations are changing. You talked about a lot more focus on data and analytics. What do you see as the big gaps, right? That because we were talking in this session about how to fill those gaps. So what are you seeing in your work with organizations?
So Suen, your point. This question is, I will say, more interesting. I think more and more HR leaders will need to be like consultants, and think of
They're in good shape.
HRBP's role as a business performance consultant. And similarly, HR needs to be counselor to employees, coach to employees or managers. So why I'm making this remark is when you look at our own research and our experience with clients, increasingly functional requirements and domain requirements are a given. So that certain roles in HR will need these domains, these functions, and so on. Increasingly, the skill gaps which are coming higher are ability to build trust-based relationships, drive organizational change, partnering with the stakeholders. And those are, if you look at traditionally, these were the skills we used to say best consultants should have. And that's what is being demanded from HR leaders. And And it's very obvious, if businesses are going through transformation, you need someone whom you need to trust to really help you navigate through some of those change. Similarly, as an employee, if I trust someone, I will even at times accept hard messages coming from that individual. Vice versa, I will really accept things which might be not accept things which might even be honest from someone I do not trust. And as we see more disruptions coming in, HR has to be the natural custodian of things like, I'm not saying the owner, because leadership is the owner of overall organization culture and values, but whether we are really walking the talk, HR has to be that custodian. And that's where trust will play a super important role, because HR will be kind of put into a spot to challenge business and stakeholders much more in future. So it's a shift happening, and COVID here again, Suyen, to my earlier comment, has accelerated it. So as companies come back to full-time work, scale up productivity, there will be some hard decisions some organizations will take. And that's where HR leaders who have trust of not only business leadership, but also employees will do better than others. So I will be very keen to hear your insights on this, because you work with so many regional and global companies here. So what you are experiencing?
Well, the work that I do is really primarily in helping organizations and leaders reinvent themselves. And one of the things that I think is a very nice tie into what you just said is, how is HR, or the HR profession, going to reinvent itself? If you think about, a manufacturing, and manufacturing, by now we're all used to how it's gone into, robotics and automation. So we know that the manufacturing skill set looks very, very different, because a lot of those tasks have been automated. In the same way, I think you could say the same for the HR profession, as you could with any other profession. Accountants, that there are AI tools that take care of some of the analysis that accountants do. Even lawyers, right? There are AI engines that can help lawyers do their research. So I think it's exactly the same for HR. There are a lot of aspects of the HR role that over time are going to be taken over by the robots, right?
Yeah.
And it's just that I think HR as a function hasn't sort of reached that tipping point yet, because I think, candidly, the evolution of HR is maybe a step or two behind some of the other functions. So, it might be a few years out, but I think that, for somebody who is building a career in HR, they're going to be asking themselves, okay, how do I future-proof myself? How do I make sure that the things that I do today, which, whatever they may be, whether it's in comp and ben or talent management or, expatriate management, any of the L&D, right, in any of those areas, how do I anticipate the changes that are coming and build in a skill set that allows me to do what I do best as a human, right? Who's the strategic thinking, the critical thinking, the business advisor, all of the things that you're talking about, while ensuring that the robots get to do their thing. I'd say the area that probably has perhaps been at the forefront from an HR perspective is probably recruitment. I think recruitment has built in a lot more of the sort of the automation functions on average. Again, not every organization. So I think the folks in the recruitment COEs are a little bit more attuned to this. But I think the same is not necessarily the case for some of the other centers of excellence. So that's my sense, is that HR leaders really need to think forward into the future, how to keep themselves relevant in this profession.
So a couple of things, Suen. So what you are making as a point is very true, but I think the opportunity is now. So a couple of things has happened. If you look at the whole origin of organizations and the businesses, the way we know them, the whole Anglo-Saxon style of business and corporations, really of the three factors of production, if you think of technology, capital, and labor, the real crunch on people is happening now.
Yep.
It's only now that you are forced to differentiate on people and compete in that. So till, it's not to say that in past human capital and the human mind and the innovation was not critical, but there was still an opportunity to innovate and then reap that benefit for 10-15 years. Now it's a constant pressure. So at a business level, people and organizational capability, competencies around people has become central. So And that's why the opportunity for HR is now. To your point, what COVID does is COVID takes the whole question of digital automation, whether the need to invest, can we afford to invest out of any concern. So that investment is accelerating. So to your point, automation will accelerate. So people are in focus as employees. Automation will accelerate. So HR needs to recraft itself. And you are already making the points about what the future role of HR will be, because whether HR was in COE role or other role, fundamentally a lot of HR role was around controlling.
Yep,
But
absolutely.
if your working is happening in a hybrid mode, where you will be more dispersed and fragmented than sitting in offices, essentially you are enabling employees and managers to do bulk of what HR was supposed to do. So that's the first part. The moment that happens, how do you elevate yourself? Obviously a large part is coaching, mentoring, and all of that role, but soon you will see emergence of high impact roles. Like if you have FP&A, there is a need for an OP&A role,
Mhm.
organization planning and analytics. Some organizations have started picking it up. It will become one of the highest impact roles, because businesses will pivot and change. So they will constantly need to replan their workforce plans, where they track how to do that. So you will start seeing a lot of these newer roles emerge, and a lot of those roles will be roles around uh, strategy. So different forms of strategy. I'm not saying one kind. You will have roles around the whole spectrum of experience, EVP, engagement, and culture will go deeper. So you will have a role stream which will connect more with employees, understand their needs with empathy, be their voice in the organization. Uh, on operations side, we say it needs to be low effort, high impact. So operations will continue to shrink. Already, if you look at third party providers like us, we operate at crazy numbers like 1 is to 1500, 1 is to
Yeah.
1200 plus. So already that shrinking is happening. And the final dimension will be, you will see more of organizational change driven roles. So I'm just, it's not that clear, but you are already seeing some of those pivot happening. So the point you are making is very right. HR has to change dramatically. COVID has just accelerated it and has taken the excuse of investment not happening away.
Yeah.
So already all organizations are saying we need digital, we need cloud, even in HR we need it now. So if those investments are happening now, HR needs to change.
I think one other point that I'd like to expand on is yes, COVID has accelerated a lot of what's happening, but I think there are also certain things that, as a consequence of this pandemic, are actually going to change the way we work
Yeah.
in a relatively, in a permanent way. Just it's a question of degree. So, for example, when you talk about people starting to move towards hybrid working, some remote, some physical, then the role of culture becomes so important. Because now, how do you build a culture when people aren't necessarily in the same place at the same time? I mean, you can do it, but it's a lot more complicated. And I think that that's going to be something that many organizations are really grappling with. So how do you keep the ties connected? How do you keep people engaged and motivated in a time when they're, in the current moment, very stressed, but in the longer term, it's just a new mode of working. And I think the other thing that's, if you sort of play this out a little bit, it means that people's lives, I think, will become a lot more intertwined between their work life and their personal life. I mean, what COVID has allowed or enabled all of us to do is to basically sort of rethink how we structure our time and all of that, right? So the work and the personal become a little bit more blended from the employee perspective, which means that from the employer perspective, HR also then needs to take a broader perspective
Yeah.
around what it takes to drive that performance, right? Because I think if in the past, if you sort of segregated, your work life is your work life, your personal life is your personal life, then the organization is basically saying, hey, what you do in your personal life, that's your problem. What you do in your work life, that's what I care about. But now, if they become a lot more blended, actually it does become the organization's problem as well, right? If you're
Yeah.
unable to deliver your work, if you don't have a conducive situation to be able to to deliver against your deliverables, these all become very, very relevant. So I think there's some brand new aspects as well as some aspects that are really about acceleration of previous trends.
Yeah.
We go ahead.
So in fact, Suyan, to your point, some of the things just got super hard. So
Yeah,
if you look at, if you talked about culture, but on the same spectrum, collaboration was the biggest theme of last 5 7 years. It
yeah,
has just become a lot more tougher.
yeah,
Think of diversity, inclusion, and both collaboration, diversity, inclusion, and it connects to innovation. A focus for all industries, especially a bigger focus for knowledge-based industries. That whole continuum has become just much more tougher than what it was, and you will have to solve it a new way. You cannot solve it from the lens and the ways of the past. So the point you are making is there are newer problems, and I will say newer opportunities which will
yeah.
need to be addressed.
Yeah, yeah. We have time probably for one other topic for us to kind of bounce around a bit, which is, if we talked about how the profession is changing, one of the things that intrigues me a lot is around, what advice would we give to someone who's entering the HR profession today? What's your thought on that?
It's a tough one, Suen, because I get asked this question a lot in now my HR transformation work. But it's interesting. If you go back and look at the old time HR leaders, people who came through a generalist model of HR, by the time they reached the top, they had a holistic view of HR and were able to connect outcomes. Now, the problem is, as you come through a siloed role track, you don't have that holistic view, and that becomes a challenge. So, my only advice is whichever track you are, I think people need to be picking up projects, lot of cross functional projects to be able to working with an outcome lens all the time. Good news is a lot of HR leaders realize that, and they are throwing people beyond their roles into 3 4 parallel projects all the time. I think that's the most important thing, because unless until you understand all components of HR, you cannot stitch together a right solution, whether for employee or manager or the business leader. And then that's the thing which HR will need to accelerate. So, and even more important in an Asian context, because a lot of managers and business leaders are young in many markets.
Yep.
And interestingly, the HR partner supporting them is even younger. So how do you accelerate that gap is really a challenge. So, and then that will only come through multiple projects and accelerating that for employees.
Yeah, I only have a couple of points to add to what you said, which really, I think, captures the essence of what HR really needs to do to transform itself as well as the function more broadly. One is, I think, just to add to what you mentioned, I really like the hourglass model, which is, as you start out, in as an HR professional, get all the foundational steps in
Yeah.
place, right? So you've got strong base, but then you got to develop some depth and expertise.
Yeah.
And then that prepares you for a role that can be strategic. It's not about preparation for the CHRO role per se, not necessarily. It might or may not be, but it's about preparation to have a holistic view of the business, which I think as you rightly put it. I think the other piece of advice that I would give to someone entering the HR profession today is, there's a bit of a cartoon, which, many of our HR friends, when they are out recruiting, they will hear candidates, and you ask the candidates sort of, why are you interested in HR? And again, it's a bit of a cartoon, but it's true. It has some truth to it. And you hear from the candidate, oh, I want to go into HR because I like people. So I think one of the pieces of advice I give to someone entering the HR profession today is, yes, absolutely. You represent the voice of the employee, but equally, you got to remember that you're there to also balance the business and how the business is going to be growing in the future.
Yeah.
So full circle back to where we started, you got to understand business, you got to understand accounting, you need to understand how to read the annual report,
Yeah.
you need to understand analytics. So full spectrum, right, of skills that I think would be really what separates the good from the great HR professionals in the future.
Yeah. And Suyan, to your point, I think HR professionals need to also brand HR better. So I think so HR needs to have a better brand. And I was reading a recent research. I think it's done by the institute, which is run by an old colleague of ours, Mark Heffron. in his this year's research, he was surprised by the fact that HR as a collective has low ambition. So because somewhere personal ambition also translates to success. So HR has a branding challenge if you look outside, and some of it you were talking about. So it's not really clear what value HR brings, and that's where the question about whether HR function should exist and all that discussion which happens. The second thing is many HR leaders themselves, on average, have lower ambition than leaders in other functions, and this is based on data where not enough n minus one and n minus two of CHROs were aspiring to be CHROs. Not enough CHROs and n minus one CHROs were aspiring to be business leaders. And so, and to your point, if you know the business like any other business leader, there should be some CHROs aspiring to be business leaders. So when I read that report, it was super telling to me that maybe there is a problem. How do we inspire youngsters, not only on this track because you want to be connected to people, but really this is one of the central pieces which makes business run and succeed. And then from there on, there is a longer journey.
Yeah. So, I mean, fantastic way to close up. I think, if you sort of summarize everything that we've talked about in the past half an hour, yes, there are a lot of challenges ahead of us because of the tremendous amount of change and the pace of this change. But equally, there are tremendous opportunities ahead for those in the HR profession who are willing to seize those opportunities and want to actually see HR take a more strategic business driving role for the future. So, Shaswat, thank you so much. This has been really fun.
Yeah, this has been fun. So we need to take this online conversation offline and meet and do more conversations. Thanks, Sue, and it was wonderful.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
This was such an engaging conversation. Thank you, Suyen and Shaswat, for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, Shaswat will be joining us in the speaker room to take your live questions. So please join him in the Zoom room if you have any burning questions for him and make the most of this opportunity. I'm going to see you all there. And now we're going to take a short break. Do not forget to join us in Mercer chat room for Chat Storm at sharp 11 a.m. Thank you.